Hey, hello, WC 402 students. This is Bob Jackson. This is week two of Introduction to Ecology. I see on my PowerPoint I have weeks two. It should say week two. Um, but we're in week two. This is actually Introduction to Ecology, and where we'll start talking about ecology and what we and just how we go about studying ecology and the importance of ecology in the world today. A lot of people that actually uh, get involved with studying ecology um, are some regular everyday people, including farmers. I feel, and just because I come up around farming and worked on a farm when I was a kid, and actually until I was a young adult, because I worked on a farm for several years after I first started teaching. Some of the people that understand the ecology of our environment and the world around us are farmers and then hunters. Um, I've done some hunting, and my brother was a avid deer hunter and a taxidermist and all, and he understood the ecology of deer and bear and elk. He did a good bit of elk hunting. He understood the ecology of the animals he hunted much better than most students because he lived that life and he pretty much lived in the woods during hunting season. Um, so that's where I will be one to say over and over again, it's the people like that understand this much better than even classroom teachers that teach ecology and biology and these types of things over and over again. Even professional fishermen, commercial fishermen. I've gone fishing a number of times in everywhere from Florida to Alaska, and usually go with a guide. And those guys have a very good understanding of the ecology of the fish that they're fishing for. So it doesn't take um, professional biologists, so to say, to find people that truly understand ecology, but most of them know very specific ecology of areas. But you can also have folks that live in mountainous regions and are dependent on even tourism for the areas. They understand the ecology of those areas, just like the people that in Yellowstone National Park and Rocky Mountain National Park and places like that, they understand the ecology of those areas and understand the ecology of like the wolves and the elk and the bison that you find in those areas because it has because of the tours they take people on and showing people the areas, it has paid them to know the ecology of those animals very well. And typically, those are the folks that know more about ecology than the people that think they do, and that's some of the classroom teachers. Okay, so I'll promote that over and over again. So anyway, we're doing introduction to ecology this week. There are several different levels of ecology that you can talk, from global ecology to where you're talking the entire biosphere and how we need to take care of the biosphere for the wellness of all of us, to landscape ecology, which can be just actually around your house or is become more and more important uh, in communities and suburbs and subdivisions and so forth to actually kind of develop the green part of your community, and that's from developing lakes and ponds within subdivisions to the types of vegetation and trees and all that you have on the properties in a community. I know I live out in the country, way out in the country, and I have done a whole lot of work on my land and have planted actually thousands of trees, and I take care of the trees on my property. So I would call all that landscape ecology. Ecosystem ecology is where you dive into actually very specific ecosystems. Like it could be a pond, it could be a lake, it could be a stream, it could be a mountainside, it could be a tundra or a desert or a meadow. Those are all types of ecosystems that you could just study that one ecosystem ecology and what's going on there, including the populations of animals and plants and all that live within that um, ecosystem. But you also have community ecology that you can call community ecology, which where you get into a community of distinct animals. Like here in Indiana, you have a community of animals with deer being one of the prominent species in the community. But within that community, you not only have deer, but you have coyotes, you have fox, you have um, possums and raccoons and all that are all integral parts of the community. So that's what I call a wildlife community. But of course, you can also tie into the community ecology is small towns, suburbs, and even homes, because you have communities um, where people live, and that impacts the environment, affects whether you got the deer around or not. Like my since there's hardly anyone around my place, I've got all kinds of deer on my property that go right through my front yard. But in small towns and so forth, you don't have near the movement of the animals, so the community affects um, the environment and the animals in the area. Okay, population ecology, we can actually study individual populations, like we could study just bison or wolves. I've done actually a study on bison and wolves in Yellowstone National Park. And or you could study if you're into white-tailed deer. My brother was very much into studying white-tailed deer. He was a taxidermist, and he knew deer quite well, and he could age deer pretty well, and also knew the diseases and so forth that deer carried, and from chronic wasting disease to different diseases that they can have, and that's where he was very focused on one population of animal. And like professional bass fishermen, they're very much about the population of bass and how they're going to be more successful fishing bass. If you got guides that take you to fishing for halibut or salmon or whatever, they very much understand those populations and where you're going to find them and how you're going to be most successful catching them. But population ecology is where you're focusing on one population of animals, or you can also do plants. Okay, just like we've lost um, most all of our ash trees in Indiana over the last 15, 20 years because of the emerald ash borer. So you could just study the ash trees and how they impact where, or you study the emerald ash borer, you're studying a population. And then organismal ecology is where you're really studying the um, individuals within a population. So just one fish or one frog or one cow or horse or whatever, but organismal ecology is where you're studying them individually within an area. Okay. But you can also, there's other ecological levels that you could look at besides these if you really get into it. Some of the neat ecological studies is like if you get into studying coral reefs and and things like that. Okay, so let's go on here. Ecology. I never did really say a definition of it on the other page, so here you have a definition. Ecology is the study of organisms, the environment, and how the organisms interact with each other in their environment. Okay, ecology does include humans and the impacts that we have on the environment overall. That's where it's very important for us today to have an understanding of ecology and how we are impacting things out there. Like white-tailed deer around here virtually have no natural predators. So it is absolutely necessary, whether some people want to believe it or not, that they be hunted. Okay, and without hunting a deer, then their populations grow out of control, and that creates a lot of other problems from overbrowsing to the diseases that move more rampant through the population of deer. Okay, so but that's ecology, and that's why, and people don't understand it too that one of the biggest things to push money into studying ecology and and taking care of our environment better overall and stocking our lakes with fish and taking care of some of our wilderness areas throughout the country is the monies that we pay for hunting and fishing license is where is when the money's taken in from that, at least those monies are to be going for. Of course, the monies are also used for game wardens and law enforcement used in those areas, but a great majority of the monies go from everything from stocking lakes and ponds and rivers with fish to doing all the things we can do to maintain environmental areas for much of our wildlife, from white-tailed deer to all kinds of, even like now we see bobcats in Indiana, but it's taken some work to get us to um, where we have that. Okay, so some of the levels of ecological organization I'm showing you on this page, where you can range from the individual organism, like one frog, to a population of frogs, to a community of various animals in that given area. So you have frogs and earthworms and trees and grass and weeds, you might just call them, wildflowers, um, to fox, to possums, to coyotes, to deer, to squirrels, to chipmunks, to, I mean, you can go on and on. Okay. But all the animals I'm naming would be all in one given area. So in that one meadow, in that one field, or in that one pond, if you want to talk aquatic species. Okay. That would be a community of living things. And then those communities of living things live within what you call the host system of all of them interacting, their populations interacting together and making the environment what it is you call an ecosystem. Okay, and then you put all the ecosystems of the world together, you would call it the biosphere of the world. So that would be your, for ecology purposes, that would be your main levels of ecological organization. Okay, and just kind of giving a pictograph over here of the same thing and giving some more specifics within it. Like it takes biodiversity. The greater the biodiversity, the better the things are. Like one of the most biodiverse areas, or two of the most biodiverse areas on the earth, are your rainforest, particularly in South America and Central America, and your coral reefs, like off the coast of Florida and the Florida Keys, and in the Caribbean islands area and off of Hawaii. Those are some of the richest, most biodiverse areas, and are also some of the neatest places to go and experience. I've not been to a true rainforest, but I have done scuba diving over the coral reefs off the Florida Keys several times. Really, really neat. I highly recommend doing it. But biodiversity is good. Biodiversity just means you have a whole lot of different species living within a given area. The more biodiverse it is, actually, the better it is. Okay. And with the biodiversity, you get species interactions, and those interactions are what makes it all good. Okay. Your succession is and we'll talk about it on a later slide. Succession is like if you let an area go and just let it grow and develop as it's going to naturally. That's succession. Like if I quit mowing my yard and do nothing to it, what takes place is succession. So in 10 years, you're going to see different species, particularly vegetation, in that area than it was when it was just my yard or whatever that was a grassy field. You'll start to see trees in it, many different types of weeds and wildflowers and shrubs and briars and stickers and all the things, terminology we have for them that's more common terms than anything. That's succession. Okay, succession is good and it's natural actually. We don't like, people don't like typically weedy, brushy areas in a subdivision. However, there's a lot of good typically that's where you get your rabbits and your raccoons and your possums and chipmunks and your squirrels and all, and you have habitat for them and bedding areas for deer and so forth. Okay, human impact is always a constant factor, and we need to lessen that and also turn it around. Okay, and energy flow we talk about, which actually takes place with the species interactions. There has to be energy flow in the environment, particularly starting from plants, which store the energy of the sun, and then it gets passed from the plants to the animals. That's what keeps us all alive and going. Without the grasses and the plants and those types of things, all of it won't work. Okay, that's where you see a whole lot less diversity in a desert. You don't have a lot of vegetation. Okay, so then you move on a little deeper into this and talk about the ecosystems. And that's where we're saying ecosystems are communities of living organisms. Now then, and I think I was pretty clear on the fact that uh, it's a variety of organisms, and the more biodiverse it is, the better. But it also includes abiotic components like water, land, dirt, soil, the minerals in the soil, which we say are the chemical compositions. Um, those are all abiotic, non-living factors in the environment that all living things need. I mean, trees need minerals to grow. Trees need nitrogen to grow. Cornfields, soybean fields. We had to add fertilizers anymore to them because it depleted the soils. But those plants need those minerals, those fertilizers, those nitrogen and nitrates in order to grow and develop. Okay, so in every ecosystem, the key thing showing you here, key components of an ecosystem, you have biotic components, you have abiotic components. Okay, the biotic components are your mainly your consumers and your producers, but also includes your decomposers. Okay, your consumers are your animals for the most part. Okay, in which in your animals you can then divide them into herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detrivores. Okay, the herbivores are your plant eaters. Carnivores are meat eaters. Okay, like herbivores a rabbit. Okay, carnivores is a coyote or a wolf. Okay, omnivores are actually raccoons and bears. Okay, because bears will eat both plants and animals. Okay, we usually think of like a grizzly bear eating a lot of meat, yeah, but they will also eat berries and stuff like that. You just talk to someone that spent a bunch of time in the Montana area where there's grizzly bears and they love to go huckleberry picking. Um, Grizzly bears love huckleberries. Okay, they are omnivores. Okay, then your detrivores are the ones that will live on a lot of your dead animals and dead organic materials and help break things down more. And they also fall within your decomposers, which typically are decomposers, your bacteria and organisms, microorganisms in the soil that break things down. And some of those can even be like fungi. Okay. Producers are your plants. Okay. Mainly plants. You can have some chemotropes that you find in things like geysers and in the ocean. Okay, you don't typically find any of them on the land to any extent or in soils. Okay, but producers are, for the most part, plants from grasses and herbs and so forth to trees. Okay. Over here on this side, showing you types of ecosystems. Okay, you can range from aquatic to terrestrial. Aquatic, mainly the main two types are freshwater and marine. Marine, saltwater, and freshwater is your lakes, your ponds, your streams, your rivers, your wetlands, your swamps. Okay, marine are your oceans and your bays off the oceans that are saltwater. Okay, marine is saltwater environments, and freshwater is freshwater. Doesn't have a lot of salt in them. And yeah, they're two completely different environments. If you take a saltwater fish and put it in a freshwater pond, it's going to die. Okay, if you take a saltwater plant and put it in a freshwater pond, it's going to die. Okay, because it can't deal with the different environments. That's tremendously different. I mean, salt water's got a lot of salt in it, and it really changes things. Okay. Terrestrial environments are, and there can be more than what's here on this page. These are just kind of the main biomes, really, of the world. Okay. From your forests, your woodlands, um, and you can talk from boreal forest to temperate forest to evergreens to deciduous forests like we have here in Indiana. Okay, but you have those are what you call terrestrial environments. But then you have deserts, grasslands, tundras, in which there's actually different type of tundras. You can go to the tundra all the way up toward the northern part of Canada and northern part of Alaska and the North Pole and Greenland. But you also have alpine tundra. Like if you go out to Colorado and go up in the mountains or Montana and Wyoming and on up through Alaska, on up to Alaska and through Canada, you get up to the tops of the mountains where there's a lot of snow actually throughout the year and very little vegetation. That's known as an alpine tundra. And I love the alpine tundra. I love getting to the top of a mountain and seeing the tundra in the summertime. It is really, really cool. But they have very, very short, if they have any growing season, oh, it's very short. And there's very little vegetation. Okay. But those are all terrestrial, what you'd call terrestrial parts of or types of ecosystems. Okay. You got food chains and you got food webs. Okay, a food chain is just where it's simplified. It exists, but it's much more complicated than it really exists. Okay, a food chain, you typically start out teaching students in elementary school that a food chain is like you have grass. Grass is eaten by grasshoppers and different insects. Okay, that grasshopper is eaten by a frog, the frog eaten by a snake, the snake by an eagle. Okay, that is a food chain, and you can come up with several different food chains um, for a community or for an ecosystem. However, what really exists, and this really isn't the best because I don't believe all these arrows go into the eagle, is a food web. So if you take a frog doesn't just eat grasshoppers. Okay, a frog will eat any insect that it can eat. Okay, so that's where you're seeing a butterfly, a dragonfly, and so forth here, and that's true and that's good. Okay, now then the frog will get eaten by the snake, of course, and that's showing pretty good here. Okay, but now then that snake won't just eat frogs. It's going to eat rats. It's going to eat mice. It's going to eat voles. It's going to eat anything, any small rodent that it can eat. Okay, it's just that's what it's going to do. It's not going to stop and say, well, that's not one of the things they eat. If it's small enough to eat and it's a rodent, they're going to eat it. Okay. Um, and then like wolves, which is not shown here very good what wolves eat. Okay, wolves will eat small elk or small or sick elk. Wolves will eat um, young or diseased or weak bison. Okay, they will take down any larger animal that they can to eat, and that could include farm animals, and that's where farm animal ranchers have had a lot. There's been a lot of controversy with ranchers in and around Yellowstone National Park and Rocky Mountain National Park right now that are quite perturbed by the fact that we brought wolves back to those areas of this country because those wolves will eat sheep and they will eat um, cattle. Okay, and once they find them, they will keep coming back for more because it's easy pickings. Okay, but that's where you see a food web is each individual species within a community, within an area, will eat more than one thing. So then you get this intricate web of organisms that feed on each other. Okay, uh, and if you do away with one species because of something you've done, like we annihilated many, many years ago, back in the 1920s, we annihilated most wolves in the United States. There are hardly any left at all. There's few up in Michigan and and Wisconsin, the northern parts of Wisconsin and Minnesota, uh, and then on up into Canada. But virtually from the 1920s through the 1990s, there were no wolves in the lower part of the United States because we'd hunted them to extinction. People wanted them gone. Ranchers and farmers particularly wanted them gone, and we pretty much succeeded at it. And then in 1990s, they reintroduced the wolves to Yellowstone National Park. And just in the last few years, they have reintroduced them in Colorado, which has created some controversy with the ranchers there now. But food webs are important. And when the wolves were eliminated, it made dire problems, particularly with elk and bison both, and the areas because of overpopulation of them. Bringing wolves back got their populations under control. That is the reason for reintroduction of wolves. Okay, although some people don't like it. Okay, but wolves then also compete with grizzly bears, so we've seen some things change in that regard. Okay. So now then, some other consequences of food webs. You have biomagnification and you have bioaccumulation. These are totally anthropogenic or human impacts from us putting so many chemicals out there in the environment. Most of them being herbicides. The most famous one being DDT. We've got our biggest understanding of both these terms and how they occur in populations by studying what happened with DDT. DDT was a pesticide used to kill mosquitoes, and it would work great through World War II because of all the malaria that our soldiers and so forth were dying from in different areas of the world where they were in battle and in wartime. So by spraying DDT, they were able to get control of malaria. But we also got control of mosquitoes across this country and other insects because it wasn't just mosquitoes that it was used on. Farmers used it too because it's very effective in killing a variety of pests that were hard on crops. But now then what happened through time is DDT out there in the environment and in all the soils and taken up in plants caused these two problems, biomagnification, bioaccumulation. Okay, biomagnification occurs through more than one species. Okay, like you get DDT on plants, okay, which is kind of shown here, is plant material. Grasshoppers or whatever types of insects eat the plants. So now then these get DDT in them from the plants that the DDT was sprayed on. Okay. So now then these insects get eaten by birds or frogs or other uh, animals that eat insects. Okay. So now then that DDT was them went into these. They eat more and more and more of the grasshoppers. The grasshoppers eat more and more grass. The DDT builds up the most in the organisms at the top of the food chain. You call these at the top of the food chain because of the larger animals. This is bottom of the food chain, this top of the food chain, ultimately to eagles and hawks and osprey and birds of prey like that, or like whales and porpoises in the ocean. It also occurs with the top level consumers take in DDT or any other chemical that you want to talk about using in the environment, and more of those chemicals do build up in their bodies. You call it biomagnification. Okay, you can get you get much more concentrated DDT in the top level consumers than down here. Okay, that's just what happens. That's what's showing you here. Like in the water, the DDT could only have a concentration of this. But then each of the successive organisms, as they're taken, like the zooplankton in the water, has 0.04 ppm parts per million of the contaminant, which we're talking DDT here. But then because they don't just eat one of these little aquatic organisms, these fish eat bunch of this zooplankton. And so you go 0.04 ppm plus 0.04 ppm plus 0.04 ppm. That builds to a higher concentration in this fish. Then this fish gets eaten by this larger fish, and this fish gets eaten by the eagle. The eagle ends up with the highest concentration of whatever the contaminant is in it. Okay, now then, we first studied this and got known about it with DDT, but now there's other like PCBs from our transformers, electrical transformers. They found bioaccumulated in porpoises and whales, and that's where they found whales and porpoises washed up on the shore around the world, and found out that they had they couldn't really prove it's what they died from a lot of times, but they'd find that they had high levels of PCBs in their tissues. Okay, so it bioaccumulated there because of the chemical was first in the water and on the smallest organisms that were then being eaten by the larger organisms, and the largest organisms end up with the highest concentration, and that's why it ultimately is believed it killed them. And that's why with the eagles, the DDT caused the eagles, is what they linked it to, is their eggshells would be weak and not hardened properly. So then they wouldn't have successful hatches of the eaglets. And that's where from the 1970s through the 90s to early 2000s, we had very few eagles. You hardly seen any eagles in Indiana. Now they've made a comeback, but we banned DDT in 1972 in the United States. So that's where it's been able to make a comeback. Okay, so but biomagnification is where it accumulates in the top level consumers. Bioaccumulation is where just individual species keep on taking in more of the chemical, and then those can then be eaten by others in the food chain. And you have to talk the food chain for biomagnification, because here they're only going to get a certain concentration in one organism, but then here's where the biomagnification, where it becomes super concentrated through time, and that's where the ultimate problem is. Okay, now we'll kind of change gears here and just go through some ecosystems. Here's showing you some examples of ecosystems. These are freshwater ecosystems. Only 2% of the earth is made up of freshwater ecosystems. We love our freshwater ecosystems, from boating to boating and fun activities on it. We used to try to drown the kids all the time on the lakes. I've had everything from ski boat to pontoon boat to fishing. Okay, our lakes and our reservoirs are very, very important recreationally and for fishing. The fishing industry is huge. And everything from bass fishing to salmon fishing, to fly fishing out west, very important to local economies. But freshwater is very important, and maintaining our freshwater importance makes not only healthy environments for us, but gives us great things to do, like I say, in fishing and different recreational things. But we got to take care of those freshwater ecosystems, keep them healthy. Okay, to marine ecosystems. Okay, marine ecosystems are your oceans. Okay, are your bays uh, of the world, Gulf, even like the Gulf of Mexico. Um, okay, they are saltwater. Okay, and they could, and what's so different from them compared to your freshwater ecosystems? Your freshwater ecosystems are typically hundreds of feet deep at the most, and most rivers aren't that. The Great Lakes are very deep in the United States. However, the ocean can be several thousand feet deep. Okay, and totally different environment in the how deep they can be, but also in the salt content. The salt content changes everything. Okay, um, and this just kind of showing you all the different types of organisms you can see in a saltwater environment. And I love scuba diving. I love being on the water. I've rented boats and been on both. Saltwater, I don't typically go out there in the middle of the ocean. I'm scared of it. But to have one in a bay off of Fort Myers or off the Florida Keys, I'm pretty comfortable with, and it's pretty neat to go, and love to go scuba diving. Okay. Um, Now then, here's where showing some shallow ocean ecosystems. This is some of my most favorite areas in the world and things to do, and that's coral reefs. Okay, if you haven't done it yet, somewhere in your life, you should go down to the Florida Keys and either snorkel or go scuba diving, because it is a really, really neat world underwater. One of the most biodiverse places in the world. And I mean, these are real, true life pictures underwater on a coral reef. I can't tell you for sure that this is Florida, but I can tell you you can see these type of fish um, in the Florida Keys just fine. Really, really neat places to go, and they're very unique. It's the shallow ocean ecosystems that are so diverse like that because the sun reaches the bottom, and that's what creates all the ability for so much diversity because of the plant life there, the corals you have there, and just makes it so a huge diverse population are different populations can be supported in that area. Whereas you go to deeper waters, um, one thing, the populations be spread out more, but you only have the light going so deep. And the deeper you go, no light, there's a whole lot less life possible without the light penetrating. There is life, but not nearly like where you get light reaching in the ocean, and particularly when it reaches to the bottom. Okay, we are seeing and experiencing a global decline of the coral reefs. They call it bleaching of the reefs in a lot of areas. Here it's showing the American Samoan reef and showing you where they documented that in 2000 December 2014 it was nice and healthy. Okay, and by 2015 it was dead, and it was because of the chemicals that were released into that water. They're so sensitive. Down in the Florida Keys, they highly regulate things that you can do. You can't even, like, if I go out on Mill Creek Lake, out from Marshall, Illinois, I can throw an anchor out on the boat pretty much wherever I want to. Down in Florida Keys, you can't do that. And they're also getting to regulate what you can um, take out in the boats and the types of motors that you can have on boats, which up in Canada they have for years, that you can only have four-stroke motors, so you're not releasing oil and gas into the water. Okay, and that's the thing. Now, bleaching isn't caused by gas from motors. Bleaching's other chemicals. Okay, pollutants released from what we put into the water from actually multiple sources. Okay, if you take a look at a deep ocean water ecosystem, the epipelagic zone is a sunlight zone. And then when you get down to these other zones, like the abyssopelagic zone, you're down there where there's no light. Okay, and it totally changes what you can see. So now then, this is talking in meters. If you take uh, these times 3.3, that'll tell you what they are in feet. So very deep. Okay. But you get down there, I mean, you couldn't even scuba dive down in these deeps without a specialized suit or in a submarine type vehicle. Okay. Now, I'm not going to expect you to memorize each one of these, just want you to kind of know about it. Okay. But you're going to find very little life up here, and most of the life up here in the upper regions of this. Some in the mesopelagic, quite a bit in the epipelagic zone of the ocean, because it is the sunlight zone. Okay. Okay, here's terrestrial ecosystems, and these you should have learned in school somewhere along the way. As you go from the equator upward, that's where you get a vast difference. And as you go from the equator down to the Antarctic, you get to vast differences, because all of your ecosystems of the world are highly dependent on moisture. And that's what changes it, because of the moisture availability for plant life. Okay, so but this is colored up. You got your tropical rainforest, and as you see there in that equatorial region, so you have tropical rainforest here, you have tropical rainforest here, but you've got the equator coming right through here. Okay, your temperate forests are up here in our areas, but that'll include what we call our deciduous forest in Indiana. Okay, your desert regions where you get very little rain. Okay, tundra. The tundra is typically found up here to the north. Okay, these regions out here to Greenland and Iceland. Okay, across northern Europe and Russia up here. Okay, but that's trying, you find very little plant life there. Okay, the taiga is a good portion of Canada as far as what most of us have you been there seen, and up into the interior of Alaska. Okay, it's a boreal forest, and you'll see a lot of evergreen trees, but you also see some aspen and trees like that. Okay, to your grasslands, which you see in the central part of the United States, what we call our prairie, are your grasslands. Okay, your tropical grasslands, which I'll call savannas of the world, which we have really don't have here. You have some in Texas, I suppose, but you see most of those in Africa and other regions of the world. Okay. The southern part of Europe and the Mediterranean area here, and then down here in Africa and across parts of South America. Okay. And then it's showing on here Maine, which really isn't showing you a whole lot besides the main rivers. I assume this is the Mississippi River here, and this is the Missouri River here, I think, our freshwater environments. Okay, and then ice. Okay, at your poles and up here at Greenland. Okay, it's not really showing the North Pole up here; it's got cut off. Okay, but those would be our main terrestrial ecosystems, and we would call these actually biomes, okay, types of biomes. The types of biomes is where you're talking the predominant plant types is there. Tells you about them, okay? Community ecology, I've already really kind of talked this. Community ecology is so important. One of the studies that has been done done for a long period of time was a study of wolves and moose, Isle Royale, up above northern Michigan, okay, on Lake Superior. Okay, but what they've studied the wolf and the elk populations of elk and or moose and wolves up there, and you'll see as you go through the years, like the blue here are the wolves. As the wolf populations go up high, okay, which isn't nearly as high as what moose ever get, but if moose population gets up around 50 wolves on the island, then the elk populations are virtually cut in half. Okay, because you look at 2,500 here and 1,000 here. Okay, it actually a little less than half the population here in about 1980, somewhere in there. Okay, but then as the moose populations got higher up here to the peak numbers, close to 2,500 moose on Isle Royale, an island, you got to imagine. Then the wolf populations fell down to around half the size of the population. Okay, so that you can see, and it does make sense that the wolf populations are lower than the moose populations will be higher, but then disease starts taking over with the moose, and they start having all kinds of issues within them because they're overpopulating, overbrowsing, and competing for resources. Then the wolves get to not only them dying naturally, but the wolves eat more of the moose, and then the population declines. And here you're kind of see that they fell off to not quite as dramatic a changes. But then here, as we get to the 2019, you're seeing the moose populations getting back up here above 2,000, and the wolves are here. But now then, as this goes up here and peaks out, then you're going to see that this grows. The wolf population will eventually get here where it's died out, but then it's going to be able to grow again because of what's taking place with the moose. Because the moose cannot be maintained. It's pretty obvious moose cannot be maintain a population on that island much higher than 2,500 moose. Okay. Then out west in Yellowstone, 1995, they introduced, I believe it was 26 wolves to the northern part of the park, which I absolutely love the Lamar Valley. I've been there several times. I've taken student groups out there to study the wolves and get to see the wolves. It's a really neat thing to do. But and now the wolf populations are quite large, okay, in that area and outside of Yellowstone National Park now into Montana, Idaho, and down into Wyoming in the Jackson area of Wyoming. It's been a very successful project, but if you talk to some of the ranchers, they don't have quite as good of feelings about it because the wolves can have impact on their cattle, okay, or their sheep, okay, but very effectively before the introduction of the wolves, the elk populations had grown so large that they were over browsing the park. There was disease throughout the elk that was a problem, and just I mean what they fed on more than anything else was aspen trees, and by eliminating a lot of the aspen saplings, it led to all kinds of other problems. And what they found is once elk population was brought under control over the last 20 years, actually 30 years, all kinds of other animals have come back. The beaver, because now since you got more good stands of the aspen trees along the rivers, it creates environment better for the beavers to build their huts and build their dams and all the things they do. And then that changes the ecology of the rivers and the streams, which makes everything better. But it's not only helped in regard to the elk populations, but also bison. Okay, so it's interesting if you want to study it. But the biggest interaction is between the wolves and the elk by all means. Okay, the elk in Yellowstone National Park is one of the easiest and best examples of what you call a keystone species. A keystone species in a given area um, is uh, is a species that has more impact on that area than all others by its size. Okay, so like when the elk population gets too large, it has a huge impact on the area. But then if it gets way too small, there's not enough elk for feeding whatever. Okay, so it's a keystone species. Now then, there can be more than one keystone species in an area, which some people don't understand, but you could have like a keystone animal, you could have a keystone plant that by eliminating one plant from a given area, like if you eliminated all the oak trees from around here or a given type oak tree, it would have a huge impact on everything from squirrels to mice and voles and deer, because deer eat the acorns. So you could say in a given area, type of tree is a keystone species. But I would say in Indiana that white-tailed deer would be a keystone species. A keystone species is unique to a given area. That it'll have a disproportionate effect on all everything else in the environment in the area if something happens with them. Either their population goes out of control or you suddenly eliminate them. It totally changes the environment, or they do. Ecological succession, you have two types. You have primary succession and secondary succession. Primary succession, we don't hardly see around here. Okay, primary succession will typically take place like if you have a volcanic eruption in Hawaii or up in Alaska, or like Mount St. Helens did back in 1980 or 81, whatever it was, when all that lava comes out and then it hardens, but it covered everything up. The new plants that grow back can be totally different than what was there previously. Okay, that's primary succession, where you have life growing where no other life was before. So that about the only way you get that is if you get a lava flow and there was nothing ever growing on it. So that's primary succession. Secondary succession is what predominantly takes place anywhere after, like it'd be after one of the forest fires. Okay, we've had entire areas, entire mountainsides in California and Arizona and Colorado and Wyoming, Montana, even up in Alaska, where you've had huge wildfires. Um, we know that'll grow back. Well, what you call that secondary succession, but it's going to grow back to what it was before. It's just going to take it a while. Okay, so it's the same thing as if I take and clear a farm field and farm it for a number of years and then just decide to quit farming it and let it grow. It'll grow back to what it originally was. That's secondary succession. Okay, it's where you recolonize the area. Okay, the other thing we have to talk about, and this will be the last thing we talk about in ecology for this week, and that's invasive species. Invasive species have become a huge problem in Indiana and throughout the United States. Okay, invasive species are species that are not native to the area. Okay, um, they typically outcompete the native species. They can be plants or animals. Okay, and I'm going to give you several examples of them. Uh, they tend to reduce the biodiversity in a habitat. Okay, like I finally got it all cleaned up on my woodlands, and that is Asian honeysuckle. Okay, if you go into a woods, it's got a bunch of Asian honeysuckle in Indiana, you'll find that there's very little biodiversity in and underneath it because it grows so tight and makes its own canopy within it, and it actually releases a chemical of its own from its roots that it doesn't allow other plants to grow underneath it. So that's where it hurts the environment in the woods so bad. But it is an invasive species. Okay, invasive species typically have very high economic cost. Okay, and about all invasive species have been brought here by things we have done. They've either been brought in on boats, trains, planes. Okay, people traveling. Okay, into areas. Okay, so here's some examples. This is bush honeysuckle, which is very, very bad in parts of Indiana and Illinois. Okay, throughout the Midwest, actually. Okay, it can just totally grow rampant in the woods to where you can't hardly walk through the woods. I've a buddy of mine has a forestry business, and I've worked for him a bunch over the last 25, 30 years and spent a lot of time in the woods cleaning up woods around west central Indiana of Asian bush honeysuckle. And autumn olive is another one, and we've killed off a lot of it. It can grow quite large individual plants, but it can take over typically along the edge of woodlands. Okay, I had several on my property that I've killed, and they're a pain in the butt get in there and get on chainsaw. And the thing with like Asian bush honeysuckle, you can spray it with Roundup and it'll kill it. You spray this with Roundup, it don't even hardly phase it, um, unless you add something to your Roundup. Okay. Um, Multiflora rose is bad. You get in there, this is a rose, so it's got stickers on it. You get in this and try to clean it up. Oh my. Um, but I've cleaned up a bunch of it. It'll grow very much like and in the areas like Asian honeysuckle. Okay, people like this, and even people like the Asian honeysuckle because of the smell of the flowers on it, but it can be quite bad for the overall environment because it grows in such masses. Okay, burning bush one people planted around their homes, and then it just grew rampant and can be in woods in different areas. It's in India or in Indiana on this winter creeper. I haven't had any of this around my place, but in areas people have it bad. You'll see where people planted this on patios and over brick walls and stuff like that, or for ground cover. Well, then it's just kind of escaped and it gets in the woodlands. And it just chokes everything out, kind of like the busher. There's also vining Japanese honeysuckle that's bad. Okay, now this is a video. I'm not going to show the whole thing. I'll just kind of skip through it. This is on the Wabash River, and this is the invasive species of the Wabash River that's gotten quite bad over the last 15 years or so. These are the Asian carp. And I know both of these people. If you just take a boat up the river, the Asian carp do this. It's if you shut the motor off, they'll stop. But it's the vibrations from my motor that just kind of drives them fish nuts, and they just jump. But you have to be careful because they can hit you in the boat. They'll land in the boat. They'll have one in the boat here before long. See what I can get to where they have some in the boat. Yeah, there they have in the boat. Okay. That's on the Wabash. Illinois, the Illinois River also has the same problem. On the Illinois River a few years ago, they said had the highest population of Asian carp of any river in the world. And they're non-native invasive species. They're native to the Asian area, yet there's more in the Illinois River than anywhere. And one of the things they do, I know on the Illinois River now, they have bow shooting contests to help try to kill out the invasive carp. Okay, kind of interesting. They are a problem because they outcompete all of our native species in the river just because they're getting such large numbers and they feed so much. And one of the things that got the Asian carp problem going were the folks that are buying the carp to eat vegetation out of their own ponds, and then the carp escape from those ponds into the rivers and the waterways. Okay, so here's just more pictures of them more straight on. These are Asian carp. This is on the Wabash here. Um, I don't think this is on the Wabash. Okay. The other invasive species that's had quite an impact in Indiana is the emerald ash borer. Okay, this is a close-up image of an emerald ash borer. These are the ones that have killed out all of our ash trees. If you take and peel back the bark on an ash tree, this is where you see where the emerald ash borer larvae have been and bored into the tree. And that's where once they get into the tree itself, because the only living part of the tree is just within a half inch or so, half inch to an inch of the outside layers and underneath the bark, um, and they do kill the tree. Okay. Um, these are the mountain pine beetles, in which, if you go out west to Colorado and Montana and Wyoming, you've had the pine beetles doing to the pine trees out there what we had done by the intermodal ash borer here. And you can see entire mountainsides where there are dead trees. Okay. You either see forest fires and a bunch of dead trees, or you see a bunch of dead trees because the mountain pine beetle got them. Okay. Other invasive species, this is in Florida. These are some common invasive species in Florida now, in South Florida particularly. These are where people, the main way that these critters got there was people would buy these in their pet stores and it'd get away from them or they'd just let them go. They figure out they couldn't keep on feeding that snake anymore, so they let it go in the Florida Everglades or wherever. And has created quite a problem because of the numbers of them that are present there now. Okay, from chameleons to pythons to iguanas, geckos, and the brown anole. Um, they're all lizards. Down in Kentucky and Tennessee and Georgia, kudzu has become quite a problem. And I've seen it along the roadways driving to Florida that you can't hardly walk through that. That is so bad. I mean, these are vines. This is a vine, and it just grows so tight over it, and it not only outcompetes trees, but it pulls down and ruins trees that we presently have there. Okay, these are zebra mussels. These are gotten into the Great Lakes up north of here. And as you see, they can actually grow actually on the bottoms of boats, on the bottom of the lower ends of motors and so forth. Now this, and quite obvious, hasn't been running because if that boat was run every day, it wouldn't happen on it. But and then where you have an industry, you have effluent pipes and so forth, like power plants on waterways. The zebra mussels will grow all over those pipes and discharge tubes in the water and create problems. Or anything that is standing in the water, docks and things like that. These fellas will attach themselves to it, and with like big boats and so forth, it changes the streamlining of the boat moving through the water when you get all these things built up on the bottom. That's where they had to dry dock and clean off the bottoms of some of the boats of things like these critters. Okay, and I think that's it. Okay, so that wraps up this week. Hope you got some interest in this stuff. Thanks for spending your time taking a look at this video. Please do the study questions for this week and this discussion post that I have for you. Have a great week. Thank you.